Welcome back to Skin to It. I'm Dr. Sandy Skotnicki, board-certified dermatologist.
And I'm Marlo Sutton, fashion stylist and beauty enthusiast. So today we're tackling a topic that affects millions of people but remains shrouded in mystery for most, and that is clinical trials. Whether you've been offered a spot in one, are curious about cutting-edge treatments, or just want to understand how new medicines actually get approved, this episode is for you.
So today we have the privilege of being joined by Dr. Melinda Gooderham. She has spent years running clinical trials and helping patients navigate this process. And interestingly, this is Clinical Trials Month. I mean, who knew? There's a month and a day for everything. So I'm going to give you a little introduction to Melinda. And many moons ago, Melinda was my resident, but now she is a world-renowned speaker and researcher. She's a dermatologist and medical director of Skin Center for Dermatology in Peterborough and an investigator for Probity Medical Research. She's also an assistant professor at Queen's University and a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, and she specializes in inflammatory skin disease. Dr. Gooderham has led over 250 clinical trials, published more than 250 peer-reviewed articles in top journals, and is an internationally recognized speaker on emerging dermatology therapies. And for any of those listeners that don't understand, that is very impressive. So 250 trials and peer-reviewed articles is a pretty big deal. So just a quick overview. This is going to be an episode on Clinical Trials 101, but we are going to touch on some dermatology topics. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, since this is a 101 episode, let's really just get into it and start with the basics of what is a clinical trial.
So a clinical trial is a very well organized experiment, basically, where you look at an intervention in a population to, in the case of drug development, to look at the safety and efficacy.
So, I think, I understand all this, but, and I know some patients and even Marlo, when we were prepping for this, let's take us through kind of the phases. So there's like a phase 1, sort of phase 2 of trials. And what does that mean for the general public? What does that entail? What does that mean?
Perfect. Yeah. And, even being a physician, you don't always understand what the different phases are. So I can understand that. So phase 1 is really safety first. You have an idea, you think this treatment may be beneficial for a specific condition. And so you want to test that out and you want to make sure that it's safe. So you start in a very small number of patients, maybe 80 to 100 patients, and you use a very low dose, and you may increase the dose over time, and you look at the safety of that. That could be in healthy volunteers, or it could be in the condition that you are looking to explore. So the phase 2, then, okay, phase 1 is done. You know that it's safe, it's tolerable by the patients. Then phase 2, you want to think, okay, what's the right dose? So it's typically called a dose finding study. So maybe you have a cream for psoriasis and you want to test it in 0.05%, 0.1%, 0.3%, and 0.5%. So you would then, in phase 2, you typically have a few hundred patients and you would do it over, say, 12 to 16 weeks, and you test out the different strengths compared to a placebo or vehicle in the case of a cream. And then phase 3 is the big study. That's what we go with the results to the regulators like Health Canada or the FDA with those results. And typically you have thousands of patients, 1,000 or 2,000 patients over a longer period of time, again, to show that it works. Now you already found the dose in phase 2, you're testing that dose in phase 3 in a larger number of people for a longer period of time. Then after phase 3, you take those results to the regulator, Health Canada, for example. They would then review that data and approve it or not. And then once it's approved, it gets on the market. And then comes phase 4, because now we want to see, does the medication work in the real world like we thought it would work from the clinical trial? So phase 4 are typically registries, post-marketing observational studies, and that is typically looking at larger populations over a longer period of time. And I'll give you one example of a psoriasis registry called SOLAR, where we looked at 12,000 patients over 8 years on different psoriasis treatments.
That's cool. So with all these phases, I mean, like has it always been like this? Because I don't do a lot of studies, as you know. There are some, and there's a little information for the for the listeners. Um, Trials are in dermatology in particular have become quite common. I only did one clinical trial, and that was enough to kill me. It was on Botox for hyperhidrosis. There was a lot of binders, a lot of paperwork. I didn't have a nurse. And I was like, I'm never doing this again. So I know that you have a very sophisticated operation, but is it part of my two-part question, has it changed a little bit, like phase 1, 2, 3? They're so well organized over the last 20 years, let's say. And is this why drugs have become more expensive?
Well, that is a very good question, because there has been a change over time. I think there have always been the phases that just in theory and research in general, but they've become more complicated for sure. Even when I started doing research in 2010, say a consent form for a patient might have been 5-6 pages to go through. That's kind of the informed consent process. Now it's not uncommon for a consent form to be 30 pages. It's very, very complicated, and it does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of, like you say, a large team to do that. And so it does reflect, the more complicated you make something and the more people you need to do it, the more expensive it gets. So I do think that complexity has translated into higher costs.
Just to understand, let's say in phase 1, you might not even be sure that the treatment is going to work. And
right.
Okay. And if it doesn't, then I'm guessing it just doesn't progress to phase 2 and phase.
Well, sometimes phase 1 is done in a healthy volunteer. So you really you're just making sure that it's safe. So that in phase 2, you can test a proof of concept of working in a disease. I'll give you one example of a psoriasis cream that I did the phase 1 trial for. And we knew that mechanism of action would work for psoriasis because it works in a pill form. Mm-hmm. So in the phase 1, what we did was just took one psoriasis plaque. It had to be a certain size on our phase 1 participants. And we just rubbed the cream on every day and then followed it over time. And that was more to show that it's tolerable, it works. And then once that phase 1 was done, then we could go into phase 2 to find out what was the right strength of the cream that would be best for psoriasis.
Was that a JAK inhibitor? Was it the JAK?
PDE4.
PDO was for, more from us. So well, yes. I mean, we will. So we'll talk a little bit about it, but we have these, well, actually we talk about now, that's a great way of looking at it, or a great example is we have drugs in pill form that we know work for diseases. And so then the next thing is, well, could we use this in a cream? But sometimes creams are so hard to formulate. Is the drug stable? Will it even work? Like, it works internally. So this is a drug that is now used for psoriasis called roflumilast. It's a PDE4 inhibitor, and it works really well. Like I don't know, the formulation is really great, but that's a great way. That's a great question.
Is it because more people would prefer a cream as opposed to taking a pill?
Yeah, but they're expensive.
Can I just say one other, of course, how serendipity plays a role? Just thinking of like an oral treatment translating. I think a great example of that is minoxidil.
Yes.
So minoxidil was a pill for blood pressure. And people were growing more hair.
Yeah.
So they actually put that into a topical, which you may know as Rogaine. And so then where you could grow the hair without having any of the systemic effects. Mm-hmm. So that's another interesting way that we get a proof of concept. Sometimes we just come across it, in that serendipitous way.
Yeah. So let's change gears a little bit. So we've talked about the phases. Let's talk really about what makes some patients nervous. Like when I suggest trials to my patients for different things, placebos. So, well, why am I going to do that? I might get into the placebo. I don't want a sugar pill. How do I know? Can you sort of address that concept for patients and explain why it's so necessary in studies? I mean, it has to be, but I don't know that everybody understands that.
Right. So the importance of a placebo is to show that the medication or intervention, maybe it's a diet that you're trying out, that the intervention isn't just by chance alone, because a lot of inflammatory diseases, for example, will come and go. Think of acne, it might flare up and get better. So if you have a group of people and you put them on a treatment over 12 weeks, let's say, how do you know that their acne just isn't getting better because of time? How do you know that it's the treatment? So some people get the placebo when it's an internal form, so a pill or injection, we call it placebo. When it's a cream, we call it the vehicle, because we take the product and then we remove the medication from it. So you still have the same base product that you're testing again, because we know, as you know, applying a moisturizer to eczema or psoriasis is actually going to give some benefit. So we need to know what is the benefit from just the cream versus the cream plus the medication. So it just gives that differential, and it shows that the treatment's actually working and it's not just happening because of time.
That kind of leads into your next question.
Yeah,
which is,
just to talk about the placebo effect, like people who think they are on the drug and think it works. And,
there's some she already alluded to the fact that just putting a moisturizer on some things, like especially if it's an eczema or psoriasis drug, there's benefit. So that's why you need to look at both of those. But talk to us about the placebo effect.
Yeah, so the placebo effect, I mean, there's a few different things. One, there is that inner, you feel like you're doing something, your whole attitude towards life is a bit different. Maybe you start eating better. Maybe you start doing different things in your life because you feel like I'm finally treating this. And so all of these other benefits. There's also the effect of now in clinical trials, you have very frequent visits, more frequent to the office than if you were just taking a treatment on its own. So you are being followed more closely, and I think people do behave a bit differently. And so there's that sort of combination, maybe a change in lifestyle, an overall change in your attitude, and just a greater outlook.
Yeah, that
So
makes
we
sense.
do see that happens. People get better, and when the study is completely over at the end, they do the unblinding where they tell us what people were actually on, and it always surprises me how well some people do when they're actually on the placebo.
So one of the little caveats here I wanted to talk about is when you do a study like without a phase 1, so you're funneling people into a drug stream that's already proven. So that's a slightly different clinical trial. Can you take us through that one? Because you're not going to withhold a drug that's actually working, but you're trying to find out something else, maybe some safety data or something like that.
So you mean like in a phase 4 registry or something?
Would that be what it is, a phase 4 registry? Yeah.
Yeah, if something's already approved, it will be a phase 4 study.
So, okay.
Or phase 3B. But yeah, you may select patients for, if you know they're going to actually get the medication, you may be consciously or subconsciously selecting patients that you feel might do better on that treatment. It's called a channeling bias. And you will say avoid patients that you think might not do well for a specific reason. So that can influence the results, which is another important thing about that randomized, controlled, blinded trial where patients are just randomly put into the treatment arm so that we're not biased at all, that we might put patients, maybe you're going to put your more severe patients in with the stronger cream or the higher dose pill. So to avoid that, we do a randomization. So it's almost like a lottery. Somebody off-site will do some mathematical thing.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you would assume if you're in phase 1, 2, or 3 of a trial that there will be placebos in it.
There will.
Yeah.
And if you're in a phase 4, then you would know you're getting the drug?
Yep.
Right.
That's what I was sort of talking about.
Right. Okay. That's clear. Thank you.
I think the next question was sort of about randomization.
Yeah.
Well, go through it in a little bit more detail because I know what it means, but
like, can they choose?
Like you don't want to have all old patients. You don't want to have all young people. You don't want to have all one ethnicity. So take us through how you randomize and why it's so important to randomize.
Yeah, so the randomization does remove that bias of putting patients in the arm that you would want them to be in. So and it's also blinded. So double blinded means that the physician doesn't know what treatment you're on, and the patient doesn't know what treatment they're on. It's all sort of white tubes or just a white pill bottle, that sort of thing, with just a code number on it. So that randomization is important, like you say, to mix things up. There's also something called stratification, because even by chance, you want to make sure that all the older patients don't get in one arm and all the younger patients in the other arm. So there is a stratification where a certain proportion of each characteristic will be in each of the treatment arms. And then over time, there's also something just that you mentioned before, patients are worried about being on placebo. Most clinical trials, at a certain time, the placebo patients will switch over and get the actual medication. So that's important that, we have that discussion, like you may be on the placebo for a specific time period, but you'll eventually get the treatment, because otherwise, why would somebody want to go onto a study?
And some of these drugs are so good. I mean, you must know, like, it must be hard to, you see the patient and it's a white tube or it's a white pill, but they're getting better, because some of these new medications we have, especially in dermatology, they're so incredible. How do you deal with that? Like, you have to kind of, say, okay, I know this person's on the real drug. And the patients kind of figure it out.
I mean, sometimes you are just unblinded because the treatments are so good that they're clear at their next visit. But yeah, I guess the thing, and the way I'll explain it to patients, is nobody's going to try to make a drug or a new medication that's worse than what we already have, right? So only better things are going to come out, and then there's there is that benefit, and we talk about that in the risk benefit of the discussion and the informed consent process, that there is a good chance that the treatment they're going to get is better than what's out there. Also, some of them are actually safer than what's out there. And you said before, patients, worried about placebo. It's like, well, you might wait this long to get the treatment, but once you do get it, you're going to get a better treatment than I can give you off the market already.
I have another question. Just thinking about, just because you've done this, your whole career, really. How do you feel about the controversy about, some of the nature or some of the articles that it was said that they were not done properly, and maybe the ethics of, because you have to rank, so there's all these rankings, like, when the patient comes in, if they have eczema, did they improve by 25%, 50%? Like, we have all these scores. And also, if we look at older studies, like, we're going way back, it was all white men. Some of them were prisoners. I mean, there's a lot of controversy surrounding clinical trials, and I think that's a part of the reason why I wanted to do this episode, because I think we've come a long way, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. In fact, this morning I just saw a little clip on a reel saying that women weren't allowed in clinical trials until like the early 90s or something. It was mostly done on men.
It's about the same time as we were allowed to get credit cards. It was 80s,
Yeah,
late 80s. Like, it's kind of ridiculous.
Cards, yes. Yeah. So yeah, there is that's changed a lot from that, and there's a lot of oversight. Every study that you do has to be approved by an ethics committee, and the ethics committee contains a whole range of people, lay people from the public versus doctors versus lawyers. Like, it's really an ethicist. Like, it's a whole committee, not just one person that reviews that. So from an ethics standpoint, it's very strict criteria to get a study approved. So there's that change that's happened, and also to diversify. Even now, when I'm filling out a feasibility questionnaire, which is basically like applying for a job to be able to do a study, you have to say how you are going to diversify your population. How are you going to include more patients with skin of color? What are your tactics? What is your population look like? So some great lengths have been taken to improve those problems from the past.
What should people, like, are there specific questions that you encourage people to ask before they join a study, and can they give their consent and then kind of back out, even once they've enrolled? Like, what are the...
Yeah, and that's always the main thing I say to patients right at the beginning. I'm saying, remember, you are a volunteer here. You can leave at any time. Just because you signed that consent form to be in the study doesn't mean you can't leave at any time. Basically, no questions asked. We'll just continue on with your care as we would have initially. So that's always a major point. We want them to not feel that they have to finish what they started. For questions to ask, it's always important to know, like, what are my chances of getting a placebo? Because if there are 4 arms to the study, say there's 3 different percentages of the cream and then the one vehicle arm, so there's only a 25% chance you'll get the placebo, 75% chance you're going to actually get something right from the beginning. But at week 8 or week 12, the placebo patients will get the medication for sure. So just to understand what your chances are, what were the side effects that were seen in phase 1 and phase 2 that you might expect? Are there any rare things that need to be considered? That sort of thing. So understanding the reason of the study, understanding why is this treatment better than what is already out there? What's the theory behind why you're even doing the study?
So that kind of leads into my next question. I mean, how do patients and listeners, how do they know it's a legitimate, well-run study? And number one, you're going to look to see that it has ethics approval. Maybe I understand, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, but take us through a little bit. Like I've done clinical studies with not on drugs or pharmaceuticals, and during in my hospital. So there's a hospital ethics board. So obviously that's one of the first things if somebody who's listening is considering entering a trial, to make sure it has ethics approval. And would that be written if they're looking up the trial, or obviously it's going to be in their consent form?
So every trial has to be registered, and you can go to a website called clinicaltrials.gov, and you can search that study. It asks for a couple of keywords: the condition, the medication name, and then it will pull up all of that information of the registration, the sites that it's being done. So it's also a way, if you want to find a study, you can go onto clinicaltrials.gov and all of that information about the registration and that. And it's a good point you say about ethics, because ethics approval can differ based on the site. Because I'm not located in a hospital, I have to use something called a central ethics board. And so anybody who's not in a hospital would use that one. But if you're in a hospital, you are required to use your own ethics approval. So there's often multiple ethics committees that are approving the same study.
I wonder, like the hospital ones are pretty rigorous. Is yours as rigorous? I mean,
oh yeah, they're the central ethics is always like they have the same sort of checklist to go through. With the hospital, what I find anyway with my colleagues, the hospital one just maybe takes a bit longer. Maybe they don't have regular meetings. And so sometimes the study's almost done before the hospital ethics board. So some of my hospital colleagues are like the last ones to get into the study.
Yeah. I think too, just a note here. I mean, I know you do a varied types of studies, but most of the studies that I have done, I'm not necessarily researching a drug outcome. So I'm researching, a side effect from somebody working in, I don't know, in healthcare or something. So it's a clinical study. And those also need ethics review, because we're talking to people, we're taking their data. But do you think, and I mean, I'm going to just put it out there, like, because it's a drug company, there's more money, so you're going to get things done a little faster. You've got more people power behind you, which is good. I mean, that's why we have so many great drugs now.
Yeah. And I mean, even if a pharmaceutical company is doing a study in a hospital, they still have to use the same ethics committee.
Right.
So it's
just the hospitals are slow.
Hospitals, yeah, there's a few more levels.
Yeah, to go through.
So should we talk about like safeguards?
Yeah, let's talk about safeguards.
Just somebody wants to participate, but they just want to make sure that that what they're going to get into will be safe for them. How are they reassured, I guess? How can they get all of that information?
So it is important to know, and I guess we always forget to mention this to even our patients, that the study is constantly being monitored. So it's not that they just ship us a box of medication and say, go for it, let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
Every step of the way is regulated. Every time we submit, for a new medication, it's, someone's double checking everything. And probably about once a month, it depends on the study, a monitor will come to your site. And they will go through all of those binders that Sandy mentioned before. They go through all the binders. They make sure all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. And if anything is out of order, like I have to meet with them once a month and explain why or what happened, and how I'm going to fix it and how it will never happen again, that sort of thing. So it's constantly being monitored through the whole time. So things aren't being let go. There's also a data safety monitoring committee that every once in a while they meet and they go over all the data for a specific study to make sure. And then you'll get a letter saying, okay, the data monitoring committee has approved the study to continue.
Mm.
So there's all these, stopgaps all the way along.
Are these people coming from the review board, the ethics review board, or are they coming internally from the study?
They're coming from something called a clinical research organization, or the CRO. So not the pharmaceutical company. They hire the CRO to run the study. And so they're kind of a third party that comes in to make sure. And then on top of all of that, the regulators will do their own audits. So I've had 2 FDA audits and 1 Health Canada audit, where they'll say, okay, we want to audit this study that you're doing, and the Health Canada team will come in and they have to give them all the binders. They go through everything.
Oh, that's good.
And then they write up a report. So, and that can happen at any time. So yeah, in my 15 years, I've had 3 of those.
Was that like that at the beginning when you first started doing studies?
There's always been some sort of auditing process. Yeah.
Okay.
And it can be like the European, so if a medication is going to be in another country, they can come. So the European agency can come to my office. The Japanese, one of my friends had a Japanese audit. I've had the FDA come twice to my office. So
that's good.
So that's always being monitored. And I think patients don't know that, and that it really is very strict.
Well, they should.
They really should. I don't think I knew that. So we've got a few more questions, but because I think it's such an interesting topic. What happens if something goes wrong? So someone has a major side effect. God forbid, they're on a biologic injectable drug for psoriasis, and they have a heart attack, which may have nothing to do with the drug, or maybe it does, or they have some other awful thing happen. What happens then?
So then if there's something serious, we call it a serious adverse event, or an SAE, and that has to be reported within 24 hours to the sponsor and the CRO, because that's what we're trying to detect, right? Is it just a one-off that happened at my site, or has it happened in 3 other sites around the world? It needs to go to a central spot, because if there is something rare that's detected, the study may come to an end. And that's happened a couple of times in my career, where we've got a letter that says, okay, we have a signal, we don't like the looks of it, we're stopping the study. So
can you share with us what not particulars, but what
condition? So one was a
condition?
psoriasis biologic,
Right.
and there were a few cases in the United States of suicide in the patients, and they weren't sure, is it the medication? In the end, there was no causality shown.
Right.
Having psoriasis does increase your risk of suicidality and those thoughts. So in the end, it was felt that it was related more to their underlying condition and not the medication. But it was enough that it made a signal. Also, there's an atopic dermatitis medication that had some rare cancer associated with it, and then that was also stopped before, and that one never made it to the market. Will never make it to the market. So that sort of thing. So those things do happen. It's very rare, thankfully.
Very rare.
But that's why we do the study, right? That's why we want to know those things before.
That's why we need the studies, and to detect these. There might be a small percentage of patients, but if it's felt to be a signal, then it's not going to make it to market.
And I'm guessing you're even more protections and precautions of people, if you're doing a study on children or pregnant women or people with disabilities. Imagine those are even more precautions.
Yeah. So typically, like from a safety perspective, just in general, studies are first done in adults, so 18 and above. And then if it's shown safe and effective, then we move to adolescents, so 11 to 17. And then if that's good, then we go to 6 to 11-year-olds. And then if that's good, then 6 months to 6 years. Okay. And then if needed, we go below
right.
6 months. Yeah. So it's a stepwise approach. We don't just start giving babies medication to see what works.
That's good for the public to know. Yeah. I mean, I knew that, but yeah. So let's sort of wrap up a little bit and talk about, like, if somebody's listening to this and they've been sort of humming and hawing about, I've been really wanting to do this clinical trial for X, give them sort of your pitch to go into a trial, because really clinical trials advance medicine. They advance our knowledge of pharmaceuticals. They help patients. And one of the reasons, again, doing this episode is to if somebody's sitting on the fence, I hope that they get the real information about this and aren't afraid to go ahead. So give us your pitch to join a study.
Yeah. So yeah, there is the benefit for the patient for sure, but there's also the larger benefit for and for inflammatory diseases. For example, your children or grandchildren may have that condition as well when they get to that age. So some patients will do this for their own benefit because they want their own psoriasis gone, and others will do it, they've lived with it for 30 years, but they're like, yeah, let's try to find a new treatment for my offspring that will have psoriasis so that they don't have to go through what I just went through for the last 30
That's a good
years
point.
with stigmatization and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I never thought of it like that. There's some drugs now that patients come in and ask for them by name, like Skyrizi. Like people come and say, I want this drug. And the power of commercials, but also the power of because you said and this fellow was 70. He said, I've had this my whole life. It's enough already. I want to go. Let's go for it. We did it. We put him on it and he was clear in 16 weeks. So, yeah.
Yeah. And he's telling his friends or anyone he sees with psoriasis, he'll say, go see Dr. Skotnicki because she can give you this drug. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. Pretty amazing. Well, so I think we're going to wrap up. You told us already where people can learn more about clinical trials. So if they go to clinicaltrials.gov, they can see sort of what's happening. I mean, I think we've given them some really amazing information and understanding. I guess any final advice you'd want to give someone who's considering to do a trial?
Well, actually, I think before that, we wanted to ask you if there's any kind of derm stuff that you're working on that you kind of want to share with us, any exciting trials what you can speak to. Obviously you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the newest areas of development these days, which are exciting because, as you know, for being a dermatologist for the last couple of decades, it's been very challenging to treat some conditions like vitiligo, alopecia areata. So we finally have some newer hidradenitis suppurativa. So we finally have some new therapies in those areas. And so patients who have suffered for so many years with these conditions will now have multiple options, which is great. And so if you want actually in Canada, and I guess in the US too, there's some sites, but researchtrials.com is another site that you can put in the condition and your area, and it will tell you what's going on in your region. So there's another resource for people who might be just thinking, hey, I suffer from this condition. I wonder if there's anything, any research trials going on. They can go on there.
Do you mind just repeating those three? Sure. I knew the first two, but I actually don't know what the last one is.
So the rest of it, so researchtrials.com.
Oh, no, I meant the three conditions.
Oh, conditions. Sorry. Yeah. So alopecia areata, vitiligo, and hidradenitis suppurativa, or HS, which is when patients get boils basically under the arms, under the breasts, and the groin, very painful, very stigmatizing, very debilitating. And, patients have it typically on average for 8 years before they even get a diagnosis properly, let alone getting the right treatment. So having more treatments also makes it more well-known, and we do a lot of education for primary care physicians, emergency room physicians to diagnose this early, because the earlier you treat it, obviously the better quality of life and the better outcomes that you can have.
Yeah, because it's a very devastating condition when they have it bad.
And I mean, I know what vitiligo is, and I know alopecia, but maybe can you just tell,
Sure.
quick, just in case people
sure.
don't.
Alopecia areata is an autoimmune type of alopecia, so not the general, male pattern baldness or female pattern baldness. It's different. You get either patches of hair loss, or sometimes you can lose all the hair on the head. You can lose all the hair on the body. It's called alopecia universalis. And traditionally, they have been extremely difficult to treat. And now we have some new treatments that work very well. And
one that was just
really
recently,
life-changing.
is going to be more affordable. It's now covered under the Ontario Drug Benefit Program with a limited use code. So I've actually prescribed it to a few patients, and because it's expensive, and it's really the first sort of, as a dermatologist, I don't consider alopecia areata a cosmetic condition. I mean, it affects people's quality of life, but I think it took a while for the insurance people and the government to sort of realize that. So it's an exciting change for that. I think it's great that I didn't know about the research, what's it called again? Research trials?
Researchtrials.com.
Because I can mention that to some patients if they're looking in the area, because I'm not always up on everything. There's a new drug coming for male pattern hair loss, isn't there?
Yeah, I saw that. I'm not doing that study,
Yeah.
but I did see there were some studies
Yeah.
on that. I'm
I
not
think,
sure where they are in their phases.
yeah, I think that's going to be really, really exciting.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, we want to thank you so much for your time. I think it was a great episode. I actually learned some stuff too, which is great. It's not, clinical trials are not my forte, but I do hold my colleagues in great esteem that do them, because it's very important for our specialty.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being with us
Thank you
today.
so much. That was wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for anytime. I love talking about clinical trials, so thanks for the opportunity.
So thank you for listening, and make sure that you review and like our podcast and subscribe. It helps us bring us the content that you love, and see you next time on Skin to It. Catch us every Thursday for a fresh exclusive dose of Skin to It. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on the skincare wisdom. We will guide you through the maze of skincare and cut through that noise to help you achieve your healthiest skin. Loving our podcast? Share your thoughts and help us grow by leaving a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until we meet again, see you soon on Skin to It, your guide to healthy skin.